They're going to destroy me." The words, a choked, desperate whisper, sliced through the mundane hum of the gas station, stopping John Casey cold just outside the stockroom door. He didn't hesitate. He shoved it open. Inside, surrounded by towering shelves of chips and soda, sat Sarah Evans, the station's usually composed young cashier. Her face was streaked with tears, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably as she stared at a crumpled, official-looking letter clutched in her white-knuckled fist. A raw sob escaped her. "Sarah, what is it? What's happened?" John's voice was low, urgent, a sudden cold dread gripping his own heart. He'd seen fear in this station before, but this was pure terror. What devastating secret does that crumpled letter hide? And how will John's discovery reshape not only this young mother's fate, but also the very core of his own world? We'd love to hear your first impressions in the comments below. What do you think has brought Sarah to this point? And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single moment as this gripping story unfolds. The reflection staring back at James Harrison from the polished obsidian of his penthouse window wasn't the CEO of Harrison Fuels, a titan of the industry. It was John Casey, a man etched with a weariness James hadn't felt in years. A cheap, slightly too large cap was pulled low over his eyes, and the ill-fitting uniform felt like a costume from a play he'd never auditioned for. He turned away from the glittering city sprawl below, a city powered in part by the very fuel his company supplied. 38 locations across 5 states. James murmured the number, a familiar mantra, yet now it tasted like ash. His father, old Samuel Harrison, had built this empire from a single full-service station, a place where he knew every employee by name, every customer's usual order. A place where integrity wasn't just a word in a mission statement. It was the bedrock. James had inherited that bedrock, expanded upon it, modernized it. Or so he'd thought. The quarterly reports from Station 17 were more than just a line item of dwindling profits and alarming staff turnover. They were a betrayal. And then there was the letter. A resignation letter from a long-term employee there. Not angry, but filled with a quiet, resigned sadness that had gnawed at James for weeks. It spoke of a place where the little things that made it Harrison's don't matter anymore. It was a whisper of his father's fading legacy, and James couldn't ignore it. This undercover charade wasn't just about business metrics. It was personal. It was about finding out if his father's dream had curdled under his watch. An hour later, John Casey pushed open the grimy door of Station 17. The cheerful red and gold Harrison Fuels logo on the sign outside was faded one letter, threatening to peel away. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and an undercurrent of something else. Tension. Fluorescent lights hummed over worn linoleum, casting a pallid glow on the tired faces of the few customers and the 2 employees behind the counter. This wasn't the gleaming efficiency he saw in corporate presentations. This felt neglected. A man with slicked-back hair and a name tag reading Victor Sterling Assistant Manager swaggered from a back office, his smile a little too wide, his eyes a little too sharp. Ah, John Casey, the new recruit. Right on time. That's what I like to see. Punctuality is the cornerstone of profit, Casey. Remember that. Victor's handshake was a power play, firm to the point of bruising. "Good to be here, Mr. Sterling." John mumbled, pitching his voice a little lower, a little rougher. "Just Victor is fine when the customers aren't around," he said, though his tone suggested it was anything but fine. He gestured towards a young woman at the far register. Her shoulders slumped, her face pale beneath the harsh lighting. "That's Sarah Evans. She'll show you the ropes. Sarah knew guys here. Don't take all day with him. Time is money, and money waits for no one. Sarah Evans approached, and James felt an unexpected pang. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She offered a small, hesitant smile. "Hi, John. I'm Sarah. Welcome to—" "Well, welcome." Her voice was quiet, almost defeated. As Sarah began to explain the register system, her words were clipped, her instructions focused on speed and avoiding mistakes. Make sure your drawer is never short, not even by a dime. Victor, he checks everything. Later, during a brief lull, John James attempted to navigate the station's impressively complex coffee machine, a new model he vaguely remembered signing off on a hefty 5-figure investment meant to boost a morning sales. He pressed a button for a simple black coffee. Instead, a torrent of hot milk and foam erupted, splattering onto the counter and his uniform. He stared at the frothy mess, a multi-billionaire defeated by his own state-of-the-art dispenser. From behind him he heard a stifled sound. Sarah had a hand clapped over her mouth, her eyes crinkling at the corners. For a fleeting second, the exhaustion in her face was replaced by genuine, if quickly suppressed, amusement. It has a mind of its own sometimes," she said, her voice still trembling slightly, but this time with held-in laughter. She quickly, efficiently reset the machine and got him a coffee. "You just have to know its tricks." James felt a flush creep up his neck. Right, tricks, got it. His internal monologue was less forgiving. Fantastic, Harrison. You can steer a national corporation, but can't operate a coffee machine designed for public use. Truly undercover genius. The brief moment of levity vanished when Victor Sterling reappeared. "Casey, what's this? I hear about you needing special training for coffee. This isn't a barista academy." His eyes narrowed. "And Evans, are you holding his hand, or are you processing those invoices I asked for?" Later, John James tried to process a loyalty card scan using a procedure he remembered from an older training manual, a protocol designed for better data capture. The register beeped angrily, a red error message flashing. Victor was on him in an instant. "What in God's name are you doing? Casey trying to reinvent the wheel? We scan here, then here. It's not rocket science." Victor roughly pushed him aside, completed the transaction with aggressive taps, then turned to Sarah. "Evans, I thought you trained him. If he's voiding transactions or slowing down the line because you didn't explain procedure, 7B subsection C, it's on your head. Are we clear?" Sarah visibly tensed her face, paling further. "Yes, Victor, crystal clear." She then had to show John Casey, the COO who had written some of the original, now obsolete protocols, the correct, simplified and less customer data-friendly method Victor insisted upon. The irony was a bitter pill for James to swallow his own past decisions, now a tool for an underling's petty tyranny. He saw the flicker of confusion, then resignation in Sarah's eyes, as she corrected him. As the afternoon wore on, the oppressive atmosphere thickened. Every interaction was under Victor's watchful gaze. Employees moved with a hesitant, almost fearful precision. Towards the end of John's shift, Victor called Sarah to the counter. John James was stocking shelves nearby, pretending not to listen. Evans Victor said, his voice deceptively soft about that consistency in your till management we discussed earlier. "I trust we'll see marked improvement starting tomorrow, because inconsistencies, well, they have a way of adding up, and we wouldn't want anything unfortunate to accumulate in your file, would we?" The threat, though veiled, hung heavy in the air. Sarah simply nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Victor's shoulder. John Casey continued to stack energy bars, the bright packaging, a stark contrast to the chilling disquiet settling deep in James Harrison's soul. This wasn't just about dwindling profits. This was about a creeping rot, and he, the owner, had been blissfully unaware while standing at the helm. The mask of John Casey felt heavier than ever, but James knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in his veins, that he couldn't take it off. Not yet. James Harrison, now more accustomed to the rough fabric of John Casey's uniform than his own tailored suits, started his second day with a grim resolve. The superficial cracks he'd observed yesterday were beginning to reveal deeper, more unsettling fissures in the foundation of Station 17. He needed to understand the extent of the rot, and that meant getting the other employees to talk, a task far harder than any boardroom negotiation he'd ever faced. He found an opportunity with Chris Walker, the other young cashier, who seemed to navigate Victor Sterling's moods with a practiced, nervous energy. While they were both restocking the brightly lit but sparsely filled beverage coolers, John tried a casual approach. "Pretty busy station, huh?" Chris glanced around his movements, quick and furtive, as if Victor might materialize from behind a stack of soda cans. "Can be," he mumbled, not meeting John's eyes. "Turnovers? Active. You're the third new guy this month in this slot." "Active, huh?" John pressed gently. "Any particular reason?" Chris shrugged, his attention fixed on aligning a row of energy drinks with military precision. "Victor has specific performance metrics. Not everyone's cut out for his management style." The way he said management style was layered with an irony so thick James could almost taste it. Before John could probe further, Victor's voice boomed from the front. "Walker customer at pump 3 needs assistance." Not a philosophical discussion with the new guy. Chris practically jumped, hurrying off with a muttered, "Nice talking to you." Later that morning, the tension ratcheted up. Sarah Evans, looking even more fragile than the day before, was at the register when a roll of quarters slipped from her trembling fingers, coins scattering across the worn floor like metallic tails. Before she could even bend to pick them up, Victor was there, a predatory stillness in his stance. "For heaven's sake, Evans, can you not manage one simple task without a disaster? This is coming out of your pocket, if any are missing you. Understand?" His voice was low, almost a hiss. "And speaking of your pocket, remember our little chat about till shortages? We wouldn't want another unfortunate incident logged in your file, would we? Those things have a nasty habit of escalating." Sarah's face, already pale, lost another shade of color. "Yes, Victor. I understand." She knelt, her hands shaking so badly she fumbled with the coins. James, witnessing the exchange while pretending to organize a display of stale donuts, felt a surge of protective anger. He quickly moved over. "Let me help with that, Sarah." John said, his voice deliberately calm as he knelt beside her, collecting the scattered silver. He could feel Victor's eyes burning into his back. He made sure to meet Sarah's gaze for a brief moment, trying to convey some silent support. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, but her eyes were filled with a haunted fear that chilled him to the bone. The only person who seemed relatively unfazed by Victor's presence was Samuel Sam Carter, the station's veteran maintenance man. James found him in the cramped break room during his lunch, nursing a lukewarm coffee and examining a flickering fluorescent light with a look of profound exasperation. The room itself was a testament to neglect. A broken vending machine stood silent in one corner, and the single table wobbled precariously. "Mind if I join you?" John asked. Sam grunted, gesturing to a stained chair. "Suit yourself. Don't mind the light show. Been putting in requests to fix this thing since last March. Figure it'll become a disco ball before they send a new ballast." John chuckled. "Sounds like getting things done around here is a challenge." Sam took a slow sip of his coffee. Challenge, son. Getting a new roll of paper towels around here is a congressional hearing. You're new, right, John, is it? Yeah, John Casey, Sam Carter. Been fixing or trying to fix things at Harrison fuel stations for nigh on 30 years. Seen managers come and go. He eyed John. This one Sterling, he's particular. Numbers always look spotless on his reports, even if the roof's leaking into the coffee maker. Sam leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. This here coffee machine, he said, jerking a thumb towards the gleaming new monstrosity in the corner that had bested James the day before. State of the art, they said. Costs more than my first car. Thing is, it's the only new piece of equipment we've seen in 2 years. Everything else patch jobs and prayers. But his profit margins sky high, according to the paperwork that goes at a Volstvia. What about the district manager? Doesn't he check on things? John asked, keeping his tone casual. Sam let out a dry chuckle. Richard Stratton, you mean Victor's cousin? Funny how Stratton always schedules his surprise inspections right after Victor's had a week to polish everything till it gleams like a new dime, ain't it? Heard tell of a real good assistant manager before your time, Jessica Barnes. Sharp as a tack she was. Started asking too many questions about cash discrepancies. Next thing you know, she's out on her ear, accused of falsifying time cards. Stratton signed off on it himself. Sam sighed, shaking his head. My advice, John, keep your head down, do your work, and don't stir the pot. It's a paycheck. Throughout the rest of the day, James watched Sarah. She was a ghost at her register, her smiles for customers, brittle and forced. Several times he saw her anxiously check her phone, her expression growing more desperate with each glance. Victor seemed to take a perverse pleasure in assigning her menial, often unnecessary tasks, always keeping her within his line of sight, a constant, silent reminder of his control. The mini-climax James had been dreading yet expecting arrived late in the afternoon. He was in the small, cluttered storeroom, ostensibly looking for a specific brand of air freshener Victor had demanded when he heard Victor's voice from the adjacent office. The door was slightly ajar, and Stratton confirmed the regional audit is still 3 weeks out, so we're clear on that front. Victor was saying, his voice confident. Just keep things tight. Make sure your crew understands the incentives for accuracy. Any little complaints? They die at your desk. Richard, like always. We've got a good system here. No need for corporate to poke their noses in our business. A pause. Then Victor laughed, a short, harsh sound. Yeah, well, if they knew how good they'd all want a piece. All right, talk later. James stood frozen, the cheap air freshener clutched in his hand. His cousin. Richard Stratton? The district manager wasn't just turning a blind eye. He was an active, integral part of Victor's system. This wasn't just one rotten apple. The corrosion spread higher up the branch than he'd dared to imagine. The whispers in the shadows were finally taking shape, and the image they formed was uglier than he could have possibly prepared for. The next morning, Station 17 was a pressure cooker, and Victor Sterling was deliberately turning up the heat. He called an impromptu staff meeting, first thing, his eyes like a hawk's, scanning each employee for any sign of dissent. Team, he began his voice, smooth, but with an underlying edge of menace, while our overall station numbers are acceptable individual performance metrics need to show consistent upward trajectory. Sarah, his gaze landed squarely on her, and James saw her flinch almost imperceptibly. Your transaction speed yesterday was down by 7%, and your till was over by $1.50. An overage can be just as problematic as a shortage, Evans. It shows a lack of attention to detail. Sarah stared at the grimy floor. I was training John Victor. It was a little hectic. Excuses, Evans, are the currency of the incompetent. Victor snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. To help you refocus on the fundamentals of inventory and cash management, I'm assigning you to a full stockroom reconciliation during your lunch break today. No interruptions. Perhaps a little quiet time with the numbers will sharpen your focus. He smirked, a cold, unpleasant expression. The rest of you, let's ensure today is a banner day for Harrison Fuels. James John Casey watched Sarah throughout the morning. She moved like an automaton, her face a mask of strained composure. The public shaming, coupled with whatever unseen burdens she carried, was clearly taking its toll. When her lunch break arrived, she gave John a brief, haunted look and disappeared into the gloomy stockroom at the back of the station. 15 minutes later, an uneasy feeling gnawed at James. Victor was out front, schmoozing a delivery driver, leaving the main counter sparsely covered. Seizing the moment, John murmured to Chris Walker, "Think I left my water bottle in the back. Be right there." As he approached the stockroom, a muffled sound reached him, a sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, a soft, choked sobbing. He pushed the door open a crack. The room was dimly lit by a single bare bulb shelves, material of from floor to ceiling, with overflowing boxes of chips, cleaning supplies, and motor oil. In the far corner, slumped on an overturned milk crate, was Sarah Evans. Her shoulders shook, and she was hastily wiping tears from her flushed face with the back of her hand. Sarah John said gently, stepping inside, "Are you all right?" She startled her head, snapping up her eyes wide and bloodshot. "John, I'm fine. Just a bit of a headache." She tried to force a smile, but it crumpled. That sounded like more than a headache. John said, his voice soft. He pulled up another crate, an instinctive act of a concerned colleague, an act James Harrison, the CEO, might have delegated. "What's wrong? Is it Victor?" Sarah hugged herself, fresh tears welling. "It's everything, John. It's always everything." She took a ragged breath. "My son, Leo. His asthma is bad again. The specialist costs a fortune, and the new medication isn't fully covered. Rent's just gone up. And now Victor." Her voice broke. What about Victor? Sarah James prompted, keeping his tone, even though a knot of anger was tightening in his chest. She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision, a desperate gamble. Reaching into the pocket of her worn uniform trousers, she pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and with a trembling hand passed it to him. It was a printout from the station's register system, showing several transactions from her shifts, highlighted in lurid yellow. Below the printout, a handwritten note in aggressive slanting script read, "Evans, 450s by Friday. All this plus the security footage of your errors at Register 1 goes straight to Richard Stratton and then to corporate. No more warnings. This is your final chance." It was signed with a bold, arrogant VS. James felt a cold fury rise within him, so potent it was almost suffocating. He forced himself to breathe. This is blackmail, Sarah. The footage. What is he talking about? He doctors it. She whispered, tears streaming freely now. He's been skimming from the registers for months, small amounts at first. When corporate's new automated audit system flagged discrepancies last quarter, he started targeting specific shifts, specific people. He can manipulate the timestamps, make it look like the shortages happened under my login, or when I was covering someone else's break. He showed me a clip. It looked so real. Her voice cracked. He said if I didn't pay, he'd make sure I not only lost my job, but faced criminal charges for theft. Who would believe me over him, a new assistant manager, supposedly cleaning up the station? Why you, Sarah? Why others? James asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Because he knows I can't fight back. She cried, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and frustration. I'm a single mother, John. Leo needs me. I can't afford to lose this job, and I certainly can't afford a lawyer or a criminal record. He targets people like me. Olivia Hayes, who quit last month, he did it to her. She paid him twice before she just couldn't take it anymore and left. Ethan Jones from the night shift before, Chris same thing. Victor finds your weakness and he squeezes. James Harrison, the CEO who prided himself on robust systems and ethical practices, felt a profound sense of shame. His company, his father's legacy, had become a hunting ground for a predator like Victor Sterling, all while he sat in his distant office, insulated by layers of management and glossy reports. He told me Sarah continued, her voice hoarse, that Richard Stratton, the district manager, fully supports his proactive loss prevention methods. The final piece clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just Victor's scheme. This was an organized racket protected from above. And now this extra $4.50, Sarah choked out, gesturing come the note. Because I was $1.50 over yesterday, and because he assigned me this stockroom duty, knowing I wouldn't have time to finish creating another performance issue. James looked at the desperate, broken woman before him. The time for passive observation was over. John Casey, the fictional employee, faded, and James Harrison, the man whose name was on the building, began to surface. Sarah, he said, his voice now carrying a new note of authority that made her look up, startled. You are not going to pay him a single cent more. But John, you don't understand. I understand that men like Victor Sterling and Richard Stratton count on fear and silence. James cut in his eyes hard. I understand that this has to stop. Now, he paused, I need to ask you something difficult. Do you trust me enough to help me stop them? To help me get the proof we need, to ensure they can never do this to anyone else? Sarah stared at him, confusion warring with a nascent flicker of hope in her tear-filled eyes. This wasn't just John Casey, the new slightly awkward co-worker, talking. There was a strength, a certainty in his demeanor she hadn't seen before. Why, she whispered, why would you risk your job for me? For people you barely know? James held her gaze. Let's just say, I have a vested interest in seeing Harrison Fuels live up to its name. And I believe what Sam Carter said, a paycheck shouldn't cost a person their dignity. He took a breath. Sarah, Victor mentioned he manipulates more than just till receipts. You said he also doctors inventory to cover larger amounts, and that you suspect he and Stratton are splitting the money. Sarah nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning. Yes, the main delivery discrepancies. He always handles those personally. And the way he and Mr. Stratton talk, it's like they have their own private ledger. That's what we need to find, James said, a plan beginning to form amidst the cold rage. That private ledger, or whatever proof exists of their collusion. It's a bigger risk, but it's the only way to cut out the entire rot, not just one branch. He leaned forward. Will you help me, Sarah? It will be dangerous. For a long moment, the only sound in the dim stockroom was Sarah's ragged breathing. Then she wiped her eyes, a new resolve hardening her expression. What do we need to do? The dim, cluttered stockroom, which minutes before had been a place of tears and despair, now buzzed with a fragile, nervous energy. James Harrison, still cloaked in the persona of John Casey, outlined his initial thoughts to a visibly shaken but resolute Sarah Evans. The till slips and doctored footage Victor uses are his immediate weapons against individual employees, James explained, his voice low and urgent. But the real leverage, the thing that can bring down both him and Richard Stratton, is proof of their systematic collusion and the larger sums they're embezzling. You mentioned his computer, Sarah. Does he keep detailed records there? Sarah nodded, wiping the last of her tears with a determined swipe of her hand. He's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. He has a whole set of private spreadsheets he updates meticulously. I've seen glimpses when I've had to fetch printouts for him. He calls them his performance enhancers. She even managed a watery, wry smile. He's not very creative with names, just with creative accounting. And his password, James asked, knowing this was crucial. It's Mustang Sally 77, Sarah said without hesitation. His pride and joy is a vintage Mustang he keeps under a cover in his garage. He thinks it's a clever secret. She bit her lip. John, this is insane. If we get caught, the risk is enormous, I know, James conceded. But the alternative, letting him continue, is worse. For you, for others, for the company. He met her gaze. Victor has a routine, right? A predictable time he's away from his office. His afternoon smoke break, Sarah confirmed. Like clockwork, 15 minutes, usually around 2:30 p.m., out by the loading dock. Then that's our window, James said. A very small, very dangerous window. He produced a tiny, almost invisible flash drive from his wallet. I have a knack for computers. If I can get onto his system, I can copy what we need. Sarah looked at the flash drive, then at John, a flicker of something. Perhaps not quite humor, but a kind of incredulous acknowledgement of their bizarre situation in her eyes. A knack for computers, had John. For a guy who almost flooded the station with the coffee machine yesterday, you're full of surprises. James allowed himself a brief, tight smile. Let's just say I have a few transferable skills. The hours leading up to 2:30 p.m. crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every time Victor Sterling's gaze swept over them, James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He was acutely aware of Sarah's heightened tension. She fumbled a couple of transactions, earning sharp rebukes from Victor that made James's fists clench under the counter. He had to actively restrain himself from stepping in, knowing that any premature move could jeopardize everything. Finally, at 2:28 p.m., Victor stretched, grunted, and headed towards the back door, cigarette already in hand. Casey watched the front. Evans, make sure those new candy bar displays are perfectly aligned. I want to see my reflection in the wrappers. The moment he was out of sight, Sarah gave James a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Showtime, John. She whispered, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes resolute. I'll stand watch by the office door. If he comes back early, I'll drop a stack of those noisy chip bags. That's your signal. Good thinking, Sarah, James said, impressed by her quick thinking under pressure. He slipped into Victor's cramped, untidy office. The computer was on a screensaver of a gleaming red Mustang taunting him. He sat down, fingers flying over the keyboard. Mustang Sally 77. Access granted. His heart pounded against his ribs as he navigated Victor's surprisingly organized for a crook file system. He found a folder ominously labeled Station Performance Enhancers. Inside subfolders were meticulously named after current and former employees. And then the jackpot, a master spreadsheet titled Monthly Reconciliation and RS Distribution. It was all there. Names, dates, amounts, extorted, fabricated reasons for disciplinary actions, and most damningly, a column clearly labeled RS Share, with figures that made James's blood boil. Richard Stratton was neck-deep in this, taking a significant cut. The total sum embezzled over 2 years was staggering, far more than James had initially suspected. Got it, he muttered, dragging the files onto the flash drive. The progress bar seemed to mock him with its slowness. Suddenly, from the main store area, he heard a loud metallic crash, followed by the distinct rustle of multiple chip bags hitting the floor. Sarah's signal. "Damn it, James," hissed, yanking the flash drive out, just as the copy completed. He quickly closed the windows logged out, but there was no time to make a clean exit. Victor's heavy footsteps were already approaching the office. "Think fast, John," he muttered to himself, his eyes darting around the tiny room. The filing cabinet. He lunged for it, pulling open a drawer, just as Victor Sterling burst through the doorway, his face a mask of thunderous suspicion. "What in the blazes are you two doing in my office?" he roared. Sarah was standing just inside the doorway, looking pale, but trying to appear composed, a scattered pile of chips at her feet. James straightened up, feigning mild surprise and a touch of sheepishness. "Oh, sorry, Victor. Sarah was just showing me where the complaint forms for damaged goods are kept. A customer earlier said a bag of those chips was stale, and I wasn't sure of the procedure. It was a weak lie, but it was all he had." Victor's eyes, small and hard, darted between John, Sarah, and the open filing cabinet. "Damaged goods forms are at the front counter, Casey, as you'd know if you'd paid attention during your first day briefing." And Evans, his voice dripped with menace. "You know better than to be in here without my express permission." "What were you really doing?" Sarah swallowed, but her voice was surprisingly steady. "John asked about the forms, Victor. I thought they might be filed here with other operational paperwork. My mistake about the chips, I'm just a bit clumsy today." Victor wasn't buying it. Not entirely. He stared at John for a long, uncomfortable moment, a new calculating look in his eyes. "See that it doesn't happen again, Casey. Stick to your assigned tasks. And Evans, my office is off limits unless I call for you. Understood?" "Yes, Victor," they both murmured. As they scurried out, James knew they hadn't fooled him. The seed of suspicion was firmly planted. The rest of the shift was unbearable. Victor watched John like a hawk. Later that evening, as Sarah was cashing out, James saw Victor approach her. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Sarah's face drain of all color, saw her hands clench into fists. When she finally left, James intercepted her in the dimly lit parking lot. "He knows John," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "He knows we were snooping. He said the price of curiosity just went up. He wants $700 by tomorrow evening, or he's going to Stratton with irrefutable proof of my theft and corporate espionage." Her body trembled. "He said he's also looking into your background, John. He said you don't seem like a typical gas station attendant." James felt a cold dread, but also a surge of adrenaline. Victor was closing in faster than he'd anticipated. His original plan of a slow, meticulous takedown was no longer viable. Sarah was in immediate danger, and his own cover was thinning. He looked at Sarah's terrified face, and a new, desperate plan formed in his mind. It was high risk, bordering on reckless, but it was the only way. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm, despite the tremor he felt inside. He's overplayed his hand. I think it's time Victor Sterling learned a lesson about who he's dealing with. He discreetly checked his pocket, feeling the outline of the small digital audio recorder he always carried, a relic from his more aggressive corporate takeover days. It was time to turn the tables. The next morning, James Harrison walked into Station 17 with the weary resignation of John Casey, but beneath the carefully constructed facade, a cold, calculated anger simmered. He had the flash drive with Victor's damning spreadsheets, but after Victor's escalated threat against Sarah and his unnerving comment about John's background, James knew he needed something more. He needed Victor Sterling's own words, his own boasts to be the final nails in his coffin. The tiny digital audio recorder in his pocket felt like both a shield and a weapon. He waited for an opportune moment when Victor was preening after successfully upselling a customer on premium car wash services he didn't need. John approached him, his expression a careful mixture of anxiety and feigned admiration. Victor John began, his voice hesitant. Can I talk to you for a minute? In private. He made a show of glancing nervously around the station. Victor Sterling's eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. After the office incident, his suspicion of John Casey was a palpable thing. But John's current demeanor, an almost pathetic deference, seemed to soothe his ego. What is it, Casey? Don't tell me you've broken the coffee machine again. No, sir, Victor John said, quickly correcting himself. They stepped into Victor's cramped office. It's personal. I'm in a bit of a tight spot. Financial. Some old debts catching up, you know. And, child support payments I'm behind on. He let his voice trail off, hoping he looked suitably desperate. He'd spent years negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. This, he thought with a grim internal irony, was just a different kind of high-stakes negotiation. Victor leaned back in his chair, a smug look dawning on his face. Financial woes, Casey. Welcome to the club of the common man. Yeah, well, John continued, shuffling his feet. I couldn't help but notice. You run a tight ship here, Victor. Real efficient. And I've heard whispers that you know how to make things work out, you know, for the station, for yourself. He paused, then added, I'm a fast learner, Victor, and I'm good with numbers, real good, and I know how to be discreet. Very discreet. James had to mentally commend Victor for not immediately laughing in his face. Instead, the assistant manager's eyes glinted with a predatory interest. The bait was tempting. Victor, for all his bluster, likely felt isolated in his schemes, always having to manage the oafish Richard Stratton. The idea of a seemingly desperate but intelligent underling he could mold and control probably appealed to his inflated sense of self. Is that so? Casey Victor said, slowly steepling his fingers. Discretion and a head for numbers. Those are valuable assets. He internally chuckled at John's feigned admiration. This new guy, despite his initial clumsiness, might actually be useful after all, Victor thought. Perhaps even more pliable than Evans. I just figured John pressed on if there were any opportunities to improve efficiency, maybe some after-hours reconciliation work. I'd be more than willing to learn the Victor Sterling method. James almost choked on the sycophantic words, but he kept his expression earnest. Victor's chest visibly puffed out. The Victor Sterling method, he repeated, savoring the phrase. Yes, it has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? It's not for everyone, Casey. Requires a certain finesse, a grasp of the bigger picture. He gave John a long, appraising look. You really think you're up for it? I wouldn't have asked otherwise, Victor John said, trying to inject a note of desperate sincerity. I really need things to work out. The hook was set. Victor, blinded by his own arrogance and the prospect of a capable, indebted accomplice, made his decision. All right, Casey. All right. You've got my attention. Tell you what, you stick around after closing tonight. We'll have a little advanced training session. I'll show you how we really make Station 17 the top performer in Stratton's district quarter after quarter. He winked a grotesque parody of camaraderie. Consider it a probationary lesson in advanced management. The hours until closing were a masterclass in feigned incompetence for John Casey. He accidentally mispriced a few items requiring Victor's expert intervention. He struggled with the end of shift till reconciliation, allowing Victor to condescendingly demonstrate his superior grasp of the numbers. Each act of feigned ineptitude seemed to inflate Victor's ego further, making him more inclined to boast. James felt a small, almost imperceptible click in his pocket as he ensured the audio recorder was active and capturing everything. Finally, the last customer left. Chris Walker and Sarah Evans, who had been briefed by James to leave promptly and not ask questions, clocked out, casting worried glances back at John. The station fell silent, bathed in the humming, fluorescent glow. "All right, Casey," Victor said, rubbing his hands together with greedy anticipation. Lesson number 1. He led John back into his office, the door clicking shut behind them with a sense of finality. Victor sat down at his computer, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Now you saw the official daily sales report we submitted, right, all neat and tidy." He pulled it up on the screen. "Looks good, doesn't it? Keeps corporate happy. Keeps Stratton looking like a genius to his own bosses." He then opened another series of files, the real records. "But this Casey," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "this is where the magic happens." For the next hour, Victor Sterling, with unbridled arrogance, walked John Casey and James Harrison's hidden recorder through every sordid detail of his fraudulent empire. He demonstrated how he altered transaction timestamps to consolidate cash shortages under specific employee IDs, particularly Sarah's. He showed how he manipulated inventory delivery logs to create phantom deficits that he and Richard Stratton would then recover from designated employees as fines or undocumented repayments. "The beauty of it," Casey Victor gloated, pointing to a column of figures, "is the system itself provides the cover. An employee error here, a damaged goods write-off there. It all looks legitimate if you know how to frame it. And Richard, he handles any, shall we say, inquiries from on high." A little smoothing over a refiled report. "He's got it down to an art. He even pulled up the specific doctored evidence against Sarah Evans, and to James's horror, similar meticulously falsified files on Jessica Barnes, Olivia Hayes, and Ethan Jones. You see, Evans was easy, single mum, desperate. Barnes was trickier. She actually knew a thing or two. Had to get Stratton to pull some strings with HR on that one. John James made sure to ask questions that sounded naive, but were designed to elicit more incriminating details. Wow, Victor. That's brilliant. But what if, say, Sarah actually did try to report it? Wouldn't that cause problems, even with Stratton covering?" Victor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Casey, you've got a lot to learn. Her word against mine, backed by Stratton. And with this evidence," he gestured to the screen, "she'd be laughed out of HR, probably, with a police escort for making false accusations after being caught stealing. No, my friend, the key is to make them feel completely isolated, completely powerless." He leaned back, beaming. It's psychology, really. James felt a wave of nausea, but forced a look of awe. "Incredible. You've thought of everything." He then risked a slightly more probing question, feigning a new, greedy understanding. "So this RS share column, that's pretty generous. He must really appreciate your efficiency." Victor's eyes flickered with suspicion for a split second. Was this new guy a little too quick on the uptake? But John's admiring, almost sycophantic gaze seemed to reassure him. "Stratton knows which side his bread is buttered on, Casey. We have a mutually beneficial arrangement." The momentary doubt passed. Then came the test. Victor minimized the spreadsheets, his expression turning serious. "All right, Casey, you've seen how the engine runs. Now, to prove you're really ready to be part of the advanced management team, I need you to show some initiative. Based on what you've observed these past few days, which of our current cashiers do you think would be the, shall we say, easiest to integrate into our loss prevention program next. Someone who wouldn't make too many waves. James's blood ran cold. This was it. The final repulsive step. He thought of Sarah, of her quiet strength, despite the terror. He thought of Chris Walker, young, a little jumpy, but seemingly a decent kid. He had to choose. He chose the lesser of two evils, a name that would implicate Victor further, while ensuring James could protect the individual later. Well, Victor John Casey said, trying to mimic Victor's earlier conspiratorial tone, that Chris Walker kid. He seems a bit green, easily flustered. Might be receptive to strong guidance. Victor Sterling's face broke into a wide, predatory grin. Walker, a good eye, Casey. Good eye. I had him pegged as well. You've got potential, my friend. Real potential. He clapped John knuckly on the shoulder. Welcome to the inner circle. The recording was complete. James Harrison had everything he needed, and more. As Victor began to outline the initial steps for managing Chris Walker, James discreetly sent a pre-composed single-character text message from his burner phone. The signal was sent. The wheels of true justice were finally irrevocably in motion. The following morning, an uncharacteristic buzz of anticipation, or perhaps apprehension, hung in the air at Station 17. James Harrison, still John Casey to the unsuspecting staff, went about his tasks with a quiet focus. The weight of the impending confrontation, a palpable presence. He'd received confirmation his team was in position, and Mr. Albright Harrison Fuel's no-nonsense regional VP was en route with a select group from corporate, including legal counsel and discreet security personnel. Richard Stratton, the district manager, had also been urgently summoned to Station 17 by Albright for a critical performance review of his district's star station, a summons Stratton had undoubtedly received with smug satisfaction. At precisely 10:00 a.m., two black sedans pulled silently into the station's parking lot. Mr. Albright, a man whose stern demeanor was legendary within Harrison Fuels, emerged, flanked by two serious-looking individuals in dark suits. Richard Stratton's own car arrived moments later. He practically bounded out, eager to impress the RVP. Victor Sterling, alerted by Stratton via a quick text, rushed to the front. His face a mask of obsequious welcome. Mr. Albright, Richard. What an unexpected honor, Victor gushed, extending a hand that Albright conspicuously ignored. We weren't expecting such a distinguished delegation. Sterling Stratton Albright said, his voice devoid of warmth. We need to use your break room. Now, all on-duty staff are to attend. No exceptions. The small, already cramped break room felt even tighter with James John Sarah Evans, Chris Walker, and Samuel Sam Carter squeezed in alongside Victor, a visibly preening Richard Stratton Mr. Albright and his two associates. Victor placed himself near Stratton, attempting an air of confident camaraderie. So Richard Albright began his gaze sweeping over the room before settling on the district manager. Station 17 has consistently reported exceptional numbers. Your star performer. Stratton beamed. Absolutely, Mr. Albright. Victor here runs a very tight ship. Exemplary efficiency. Indeed, Albright continued, his tone hardening. So exemplary, in fact, that our new centralized forensic accounting system has flagged a series of anomalies. Significant systematic anomalies originating from this station and correlating rather suspiciously with your tenure, Sterling, and your oversight, Stratton. Victor's smile faltered. Stratton's confident posture stiffened. Anomalies, Mr. Albright. I assure you any minor discrepancies can be easily explained. Perhaps some new staff training issues. We're well beyond minor discrepancies. Gentlemen, one of Albright's associates, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, who James recognized as lead corporate counsel, interjected. "We're looking at patterns of systematic cash manipulation, falsified inventory reporting, and what appears to be targeted extortion of employees." The color drained from Victor Sterling's face. "Extortion. That's an outrageous accusation. Who would dare make such a slanderous claim? One of these disgruntled employees, perhaps?" His eyes shot daggers at Sarah, then at John. "Actually," Victor John Casey said, his voice suddenly clear calm, and carrying an authority that made everyone in the room, especially Victor and Stratton, turn to stare. He slowly removed the worn baseball cap, then the non-prescription glasses. He straightened from his slouched, John Casey posture, and the transformation was startling. Chris Walker gasped, his eyes wide. "John, what the—" Sam Carter just leaned back, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his weathered face as if he'd suspected something all along. "Well, I'll be Sam," murmured. Sarah Evans watched her heart pounding, a mixture of terror and dawning, unbelievable hope on her face. James Harrison looked directly at Victor Sterling, then at Richard Stratton. "The name is James Harrison, owner and CEO of Harrison Fuels." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Richard Stratton's choked gasp and Victor Sterling's face contorting in an expression of pure, unadulterated shock and horror. No, it can't be. This is some kind of trick," Victor stammered, scrambling backward until he hit the wall. "Oh, it's no trick." Victor James said, his voice like ice. "I've spent the last week working alongside my employees, experiencing firsthand the tight ship you and Mr. Stratton here have been running." He gestured to Albright's legal counsel. "Miss Davies, if you please." Miss Davies calmly opened a laptop. "Mr. Sterling. Mr. Stratton, we have accessed your internal station records, cross-referenced them with central server data, and have extensive evidence." She projected the monthly reconciliation and RS distribution spreadsheet onto a small portable screen. Names, dates, extorted amounts, and Richard Stratton's initials next to his share were starkly displayed. "This details over $80,000 systematically embezzled from employees and the company over the past 2 years, Mr. Sterling." James then produced the crumpled note Victor had given Sarah. "And this, Victor, your handwritten demand to Ms. Evans, Victor, was ashen." That's fabricated, forged, is it?" James said, then nodded to Miss Davies again. She pressed a key, and Victor Sterling's own voice filled the break room, arrogant, boastful, condescending, detailing his entire fraudulent operation, his methods of manipulating records, his targeting of vulnerable employees like Sarah and Jessica Barnes, his financial arrangements with Richard Stratton, and his contemptuous dismissal of corporate oversight. He even described his plan to ensnare Chris Walker. The recording ended. Victor Sterling looked like a man who had seen a ghost, his own. Richard Stratton simply stared at the floor, his face a mask of defeat. Sarah Evans, her earlier fear now replaced by a quiet, steely anger, stepped forward. "And the footage you threatened me with, Victor, the proof of my stealing, was that as real as your performance enhancers?" Her voice, though trembling slightly, was strong. "Gentlemen," James said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "your careers with Harrison Fuels are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. The police are on their way to discuss matters of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy." As if on cue, 2 uniformed officers entered the break room. Victor made a desperate lunging movement as if to flee, but Albright's security personnel were quicker blocking his path. He deflated a broken man. Richard Stratton didn't even look up, as he was quietly handcuffed. As the disgraced managers were led away, James Harrison turned to the remaining employees, Sarah, Chris, and Sam. To all of you, he began, his voice filled with a sincerity that was unmistakable. I offer my deepest, most profound apologies. This company was built on a foundation of respect and integrity by my father. Somewhere along the line, under my leadership, we lost sight of that in places like this. That failure is mine, and it stops today. He outlined his immediate commitments, full financial restitution, and damages for Sarah Olivia, Hayes, Ethan Jones, and every other employee victimized by Sterling and Stratton's scheme. All negative marks on their records would be expunged. He personally called Jessica Barnes, the former assistant manager Sam had told him about, apologized, and offered her a senior management position with back pay and a significant raise, which she tearfully accepted. Psychological counseling and support would be available to anyone who needed it. 1 month later, Station 17 was almost unrecognizable. A fresh coat of Harrison Fuel's bright red and gold paint gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, new equipment hummed efficiently, the break room was renovated and comfortable, and the oppressive atmosphere had been replaced by one of cheerful professionalism. Sarah Evans, now the acting assistant manager, radiated a quiet confidence. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by a sparkle of determination. Her son Leo was responding well to a new treatment plan, covered by an enhanced company health benefit James had fast-tracked. "Still can't believe I'm nervous about dropping a roll of quarters," Sarah joked to James during one of his now frequent and very much not undercover visits. He was there to officially promote her. James chuckled. "Well, at least now, if you do, you won't get a lecture on consistency and a demand for $400. He then eyed the new simpler coffee machine. "And this one, I'm proud to say, I can actually operate without causing a dairy explosion." Chris Walker, now more relaxed and engaging, nodded enthusiastically from behind the counter. Samuel Carter, overseeing the installation of a new non-flickering light in the break room, gave James a thumbs up. "Took a while, mister," Harrison Sam said, "but feels like old Samuel Harrison's place again." James addressed the assembled team of Station 17 and via video link the entire company. He detailed the sweeping reforms, a new entirely independent whistleblower and employee advocacy department reporting directly to his office, a complete overhaul of district management accountability with zero tolerance for familial or crony appointments, enhanced wages benefits, and a new company-subsidized childcare program piloted at Station 17. And finally, the John Casey Initiative, a program of regular unannounced site evaluations conducted by highly trained undercover operatives, and as he put it with a smile, occasionally, by a slightly older, hopefully wiser John Casey. Later that day, James stood with Sarah watching the smooth flow of customers. "My father believed this business wasn't just about selling fuel," James said quietly. "It was about people. The people who worked for him, the people who relied on him. I lost sight of that, Sarah. You and everyone here helped me find it again." He knew the fight for integrity was ongoing. True change required constant vigilance, not just sweeping pronouncements. But as he saw Sarah kindly help an elderly customer to her car, a genuine smile lighting up her face, he felt a profound sense of peace, not the easy peace of ignorance, but the hard-won peace of battles, fought of wrongs righted, and of a legacy once tarnished, now being diligently polished back to its true shine. His father would have been proud. James Harrison's journey as John Casey and Sarah Evans' quiet courage remind us that sometimes the deepest cracks in a system are only revealed when someone is willing to look closer to truly see the person behind the job title. It leaves us wondering, doesn't it? How often do we encounter silent struggles hidden just beneath the surface? And what does it truly take to transform a single moment of witnessed despair into a catalyst for profound, lasting change? This story of hidden truths and hard-won integrity has certainly given us a lot to reflect on. We imagine it might have resonated with you too. What part of James's transformation from a disconnected CEO to an empathetic leader, or Sarah's quiet resilience in the face of such predatory behavior, struck you the most? And do you believe a company like Harrison Fuels can truly redeem its culture and earn back trust after such a deep betrayal? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. We genuinely love hearing your perspectives and creating a space for discussion. Your feedback is also incredibly valuable in helping us shape future narratives. If you have any ideas on how we can make these stories even more impactful, any themes you'd like us to explore, or if there's something in today's storytelling you feel we could improve, please don't hesitate to let us know. Every comment helps us grow and bring you stories that matter. If this journey of courage, justice, and renewal touched your heart, please give this video a like. And if you feel this story might offer value or a moment of empathy to someone else, please share it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss out as we continue to explore the depths of human experience and the power of change together. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Until next time, keep seeking out and perhaps even creating the stories that move you.